Welcome to the Near Still Waters podcast, where we journey together towards clarity and calm in the midst of life's storms. Hi, I'm your host, Susie Lubbers, a life coach, and a mama to 7 amazing grown children. Having homeschooled all of my children, including my special needs child, I've navigated the challenges of raising them and experienced the bittersweet moments of letting go. This journey has not been about teaching academics, but also about discovering how to find peace and purpose through every season of life. You can learn more about me and my mission at nearstillwaters.ca. In this space, we're dedicated to empowering moms. Whether you're in the trenches of homeschooling, navigating special needs parenting, seeking to rediscover your own passions after years of putting others first, you're not alone. Together, we'll explore strategies to bring clarity into the chaos of motherhood and uncover ways to cultivate calm within ourselves, even while accomplishing the hard things. Each episode will share stories, practical tips, inspirational guidance to help you embrace your journey with grace, resilience, and faith. So grab a cup of coffee, take a deep breath, and let's step into a space of learning and growth. Welcome to the Near Still Waters podcast, where your journey to clarity and peace begins.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about today's interview when I was doing it years
Oh,
ago.
wow.
And I did implement it in the end on my own, but not knowing it led me to a burnout state where I had to find something. Yeah, my
Mhm.
goal here is to help homeschool moms avoid that path.
That's
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll just get right into the interview and I'll just introduce you and we'll go from there. Is that okay?
okay. Hmm.
All right. Hello, everyone. Today I'm here with Leslie Martino. And Leslie Martino has written a book called The Joy of Slow: Balance and Wonder in Homeschool Learning. Leslie is a homeschooling expert and longtime educator, and she understands the culture of prioritizing productivity and efficiency to success. It's easy to lose sight of the joy in education, including within the homeschooling community. In The Joy of Slow, Restoring Balance and Wonder to Homeschool Learning, Martino offers parents a guide to cultivating an unhurried lifestyle and education in order to help children thrive. This resource fills a need in a growing community of parents opting to homeschool their children. In 2019, the number of homeschooled students in the US was 2.5 million, and that number soared to 3.7 million by 2021. Unbelievable. And
Hmm.
continues to grow. More parents than ever are seeking guidance on offering a rigorous education without sacrificing the freedom and holistic development that homeschooling can provide. Parents should not only be nurturing wonder and imagination with our young children, but throughout their education. And Martino provides the tools to accomplish doing just that, drawing from on over 20 years of experience teaching in the classroom, homeschooling her 4 children, and developing a homeschool coaching program. Martina shows parents exactly how to do this. So I'm just so excited to get into some of the questions that I have for you. And yeah, I hope that we have a good time together, and I hope that we can serve our homeschool moms in a way that will help them in their journey as a homeschool mom.
Thank
So
you,
my
Sue.
first
Thank you
question,
for having me.
oh, you're very welcome. So my first question for you is, what actually inspired you to create the Joy of Slow? And was there a particular moment or experience that sparked the idea?
I think it was my entire educational experience that really was the inspiration. I have always loved education, and I've been a part of the world of education from all these different vantage points. Like I've been a classroom teacher, different age groups. I've been in the teaching of teachers space and grad school programs. I've been a homeschooler. I've been a mom with school age children. So I felt like I was getting to be part of all these spaces that were talking about kids and talking about education and talking about learning and talking about parenting and all these really big issues. But I was noticing just some really similar themes in all of those spaces. And I just felt like I wanted to write a book offering something from someone who's been in all of those different worlds, from those different perspectives, and offer something that just felt really hopeful for parents
Mhm.
and simple. As not that I know some people could argue that there's so many ideas in the book that
Yeah.
it's not simple, but it really is. It can be boiled down to something very simple for your own life. So that's why I was inspired to write the book.
Yeah, so yeah, and as I went through the book, I noticed that you actually had it divided into three parts. The first part, explaining why you felt that slow learning was particularly good for homeschoolers. And then the second part is how to implement the slow
Mm-hmm.
learning approach. And then the third part is the bigger picture in the wider world. So those are the three main points that you put in your book. So
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like you can see that you may trying to convince people that it's the correct way and a good way to school kids, and then you give tips, practical tips on how to implement the different tips. Yeah, that I think in itself is a good setup. If anyone wants to read the book, it's there
Yeah.
to help them get into it. It's not they have to know it all. It's there written out for them. Yeah.
Mm.
You obviously had a personal journey in homeschooling. And how did your own teaching career, how did that shape your perspective on slow
Mm.
schooling?
So, a lot of times when people are homeschooling and coming from the education space, or they were former classroom teachers, they often talk about having to unlearn some of the things that they did quite automatically as teachers when they are at home with their children. There's a lot of talk about that, and for different reasons. When you're in a context where you are working with so many children, there are
Mhm.
things that become important that just aren't as important when your group size is smaller, right? Or you realize that homeschooling doesn't actually mean having to replicate school at home, or a lot of the
Yeah.
things you were doing at school were just to answer to a bureaucratic authority or to prove to the city or the state or the governing body that certain things were happening so that you got money. Like, you just realize
Yeah.
the why behind certain things. So that's a lot of people's experience. However, my experience was a little bit different. I actually was working in a school that was doing some of these same things and working and using some of these same ideas with
Wow.
children. We were part of worked for a while in an environment where we were part of the small schools movement happening in New York City that kind of started in the 1970s, that just believed that we needed to slow down, that we needed to have a bigger connection, one-on-one connection with kids. So we did things like small class sizes. We did multiple age classrooms. We kept kids for longer than a year so that we knew them better, things like that. And we were also doing a lot of hands-on work, project-based
Mhm.
learning, not just sitting in rows and desks and following curriculum. We had people from all over the world coming to look at our schools because they looked chaotic sometimes. Kids working on all different things,
Mhm.
no desks in sight. And so for me, when I said I love those ideas and I was thriving in that space and I saw kids thriving, for me the challenge became at home with my children.
Yeah.
Do you really believe those things? Do you really believe that those things are worthwhile to learn? Do you really believe, are you willing to take the risk? These are your children now. And so it's not just someone else's children. It's, do you really believe these things are true? And let's see how much, because does it feel like more is at stake because they're your own? So that was the challenge, being confronted with that and saying, wow, okay, yeah, no, I get why these are real fears and concerns because I'm a parent having some of those same fears, having some of those same concerns. Am I failing my child? Am I giving them enough? They have challenges. Is this what they need? All those questions that can surface. And so it, that personal aspect of it really shaped my perspective, and it helped me to understand some of those same questions that even in arguments, even, which is why I started out right in chapter 1 talking about what slow isn't, just challenging some of those ideas and questions that we all have, and fears, challenging those fears that can surface, because that shaped my understanding. So I had that understanding and influence of knowing what kind of educational environment I really valued, but putting it into practice with my own children really solidified certain things for me, really gave me more patience and understanding, even in helping other parents walk through some of those same questions and fears.
Yeah, that's amazing. Actually, when you were talking about the smaller school, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but there's a man, um, I think he's in Tennessee, possibly. He lost his wife a few years ago, and they were hoping to homeschool their child who
Mm,
was Down syndrome. And he, of course, when she passed away, he couldn't. So he actually created like a small school
mm,
on his property. And I don't know if you've
wow.
ever had a chance to look at it. His name is Rory Feek.
Oh,
And yeah, so if you ever get a chance to look him up, he has this
yeah, I
little school
will.
where, yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, anyway, that's just a side thing. But
Oh,
it's just when
wow.
you said that the school that you taught at had that slow method,
Mhm.
I thought, wow, I never even realized there would be a school that would have that in this day and age, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, exactly. It's more
yeah,
rare now, but
yeah,
actually, I really do feel like that's the world of education. You know, pendulum seems to always be swinging, but all of these, when big shifts happen in society, I feel like people start thinking about education again and questioning things. It's not new. That's how it's
no,
always been. And
yeah,
2020 was one of those years for a lot of
yes,
people where things were happening and questions were being
yeah,
asked. And so now the next few years, we're seeing the birth of new schools and micro schools, and its education has resurfaced again.
yeah,
It happens in
yeah,
society.
yeah. It's even interesting the way how it was 2 point something million before 2000,
Mm-hmm.
and now
Mm-hmm.
3.7 million. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just amazing. That's like almost doubled in the
Yeah.
amounts. Yeah. So obviously you first began to learn about slow learning as you became interested in as you were a teacher, but how did your teaching career, how does it
Mm-hmm.
affect your home? How did it affect your homeschooling?
Mm.
Um,
It
the way
gave me a
you
lot.
approach.
Yeah, it gave me a lot to stand on, really. Like I said, I had that very unique experience, and there were so many ideas that I took, and I even say that in the book. I like reformatted this or rethought about this and how I could do this in a home setting, or how I could create this with a small group of children. Just so it gave me a lot to stand on, thankfully. But also just being in that world of education, and also seeing some of the, even if it wasn't necessarily the school I was working in, but just seeing some of the negative effects of the way that we look at children and the way that we classify them and organize them into wanting
Yeah,
every kid to look the same or do the same things or standardize the way we assess them. And there's a lot of, it's not all negative, but there are negative effects of that. And so even seeing some of those things, it influenced what I did with my kids, knowing that I wanted to do different, knowing that there are other ways to know or to notice what
mm,
children know. Then testing might be one way, but there are other ways. There are other valid ways of knowing that. And a lot of times, parents at home, they simply do with their children
yes,
what they know.
yes,
They do what they knew to do from the time that they were in school, or what they know is going on in schools around them. It's not even, sometimes they might have a sense that there's got to be a different way, but they sometimes just don't know
mm,
what those
mhm,
other ways are. So that was also part of the reason why I wanted to write the book. A lot of times, some of the more non-traditional things, or the things that are happening in small schools, are the things that, like your reaction, that people don't even know are happening out there. But yes, there are alternate ways of children, of assessing children, or of
mhm,
children demonstrating their knowledge, or learning is a life, is something that happens in life, and how to see all of it is valuable. It's not just what you learn from opening up a book and saying, know
mhm.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, and to every child there's many different learning styles. You may get a child who can't sit for 2 minutes, but like I had a child like that. He couldn't
Mm-hmm.
sit still, but he would take the encyclopedia and
Yeah.
read it. And
Mm-hmm.
that was at his, and today, even today, he has so much knowledge
Wow.
that he just learned by himself. And another child will be, they'll have to speak it to instead of write it. And so there's so many different ways to assess children. And that's one thing I always really try to encourage moms that I coach to make sure they
Mm-hmm.
know, figure out your child's learning method and
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
with that rather than trying to do just one curriculum. And like it's so easy to
Mm-hmm.
just pick one thing and make everybody go with it, but it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
actually work like that
Yeah,
as well.
and to really spend time figuring it out, which
Yeah,
requires just a lot of free time and observation, especially
exactly.
when you bring your kids home for the first time. Sometimes you just need to let them need to let them do what they
Yeah,
want to do, read encyclopedias, ride their bike,
yeah,
or figure out how to build a birdhouse or whatever it is, so that you can just observe them and say,
yeah,
oh, this is the way that they get their
yes,
information. This is
yeah, and
how to attack
mhm.
projects, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real. There's sometimes there's more just looking than
Mhm.
teaching as a
Yeah.
homeschool mom. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's very interesting. What was your most challenging part in writing this book? And was there a particular concept or chapter that was very hard to convey? And then how would you explain the concept of slow learning to somebody who's never heard about it and has no idea what it is?
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Challenging parts of writing the books. Overall, I loved the process of writing this book. I love writing and I love communicating all of these ideas. There are things that I've been sharing about for a long time. So it felt really exciting to finally put them in an organized place where people could like read all of my thinking around it and see. Because I was always feeling like every things that I was sharing felt disjointed because like this sits here, but it fits inside of a larger context. And so
Yeah.
it felt exciting to really lay out that entire thing. But one of the things that I think were really important to me to show there's no one educational philosophy that I said this in the book that can claim
Mhm,
exclusive rights to the idea of slow. So
mhm,
sometimes people hear things I talk about and say naturally, oh, that's like this or that's like this. And yes, there are elements where you can look at unschooling or traditional learning or Charlotte Mason, or that's where people's brains go. They want to know what educational philosophy fits. But I wanted to say, no, the idea of slow is above, it's not above as in better, but like greater than, like it's a way of looking at all of life. Can we slow down and notice some things that are really important? Can we figure out what is really valuable to us and to our families and make sure we're aligning our activity with those things? It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do everything in this book, but there are different ideas, things that really incorporate the idea of slow, which I will explain in a moment. So it was, excuse me, it was important to me to also write the book and include the voices of other parents and educators from all different philosophies, you know. So I would say that challenging was like revisiting or going and researching and immersing myself just again in all of these things. My kids were laughing at me because I would keep like a book count, like all the amount of books I read to write my one book. And it was
mhm.
like, yeah, it's like up to 100, but that's how it is.
Yeah.
I wanted to show, look, like there are people talking about this who are traditional learners, who are classical approach learners, who are unschoolers, who are in classrooms, who are, this is not, we're talking about children here. We're talking about slowing down to notice some really important things. So it's not
Mhm,
about style or philosophy.
mhm,
In that, some of the things that I would say incorporate the idea of slow, it's about the way that we approach education and we approach learning. So, inside of that, it's about adopting a meaningful practice of building deep roots, not about necessarily wide roots. So, it's like depth over breadth. So, it
mhm,
doesn't matter whether you're moving through a curriculum or whether you are letting learning unfold naturally, but it's saying, wait a second, can I value deep understanding over shallow mastery? What does it take to know something deeply? Why am I rushing through all of those things just to say we learned all those things? Like, what is really learned? Can you give children a really deep learning experience in one thing? Can they know a few things well? And what does it take to get there? And so it's like that healthy respect for the process of building knowledge, not just getting the right answer. I think a lot of times the adults in charge of education are worried that they're doing enough so that the child can produce certain behaviors. It makes them feel like they have done their part. But it's like, what is true learning? Can we question that for a moment? What is it that you are really trying to impart here? So it's like curating that type of learning environment that really says, okay, it's okay. I'm going to do fewer things better, because guess what? All the stuff that I was doing anyway, most kids aren't remembering anyway.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a
very
really hard
true.
one. That's a hard one to sit with. But and then taking into that the willingness to honor a child's interests and respecting the time that it takes to cultivate and develop really authentic skills around that interest. Those things take time, and that willingness to do work that's meaningful. So whether it's meaningful in the ideas that you're attempting to study and immerse yourselves in, or meaningful because it's work that the child wants to do, or meaningful. But there's so much that this world has to offer. There's stories of so many people, places, things. There's so much to immerse ourselves in. What level of meaning can we bring to the things that we are doing, whether it's coming from curriculum or coming from
Yeah.
things that we want to pursue naturally? So
Mhm.
you're tackling subjects with that level of dynamism, flexibility, saying, let's be spontaneous because this is a natural, exciting response to something that we're learning. Learning
Yes.
actually exciting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It creates
And so
excitement also then. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also carries with it the ability to redefine what's success, or to
Mhm.
broaden our understanding of what
True.
constitutes
Yeah.
rich learning, or a rich learning life. Sometimes we just want things to look a certain way on the outside, but that's not necessarily the same as true and useful learning. So it's a willingness to like really in our own minds dive into that. So the way that we approach education, but slow, is also about the home life that we're building and the way that we allow healthy margins in the things that we try to do. We, as homeschool moms, try to overschedule and actually do too much. And can we just admit that we all can use more peace? We're trying to keep up with something, some
Yes.
idea, something that we've told ourselves is
Yeah.
what everybody else is doing, or an appearance of something, or we've got to fit in so much. And it's slowing down for a minute and saying, can I create something a little bit different that feels a little bit more life giving, that feels like I can invite some more joy into our experience and what we're doing? Can we welcome just some patient pursuits that really enjoy being home? Like, home is comforting for
Hmm.
many. For many reasons. Can we just enjoy that? Can we have some just rhythms and routines that just fill us up and make us feel deeply connected to one another? Can we go out and do things that we're doing just simply because a few family members are interested in it? And that's okay. We're not feeling guilty about taking the time to do that. And it's just seeking to find that beauty and also the ordinary and everyday, because not every day is going to feel magical and grand. But how can we reframe our thinking to just
Hmm.
look at our ordinary lives as something deeply meaningful, because it's aligned with things that we value? So it's our home life situation. And then I would say that slow is also about the connection that we're building with each other, those
Yeah.
that we love, the people who we're learning with, getting out of that rat race again of how we determines how we should spend our time or what should be important to living, and just committing to a life of just learning and growth alongside the people who we love. So
Yeah.
striving for a balance in all of the
Yeah.
ideals that we would love. But
Hmm.
there's that strong sense of connection in the family.
For sure. Yeah. I homeschooled all seven of my children. And
Awesome.
the first four, I really had this mentality, what you were talking about. It was a rat race. Like I had to
Yeah.
accomplish, and I pushed them and I pushed myself. And then I actually had a 5-year break between my fourth and my fifth.
Oh,
So then I
wow.
had quickly had three after that. So I had first four and then three. After, of course, I had number seven. I was still getting into high school with my older ones, and I did them okay, but it was after they were done high school that I suffered a severe burnout. And I'm
Mm.
not just saying I was tired, I was burnt out. I was on the couch for a year. So then my three younger children received a much different education,
Mm.
because I it was out of necessity. I had to go through that to get to where you are today, really.
Mm.
And so they received a much slower style of learning. And I think
Mm.
all my children, I'm proud of all my children, like where they are now. And but there's a definite difference in them, but they all are well adjusted in
Mm-hmm.
life. They're not perfect. I was never perfect either, and no
Right.
child will ever be perfect. But as such, they're all adjusted and hard workers and have a career, marriage and children and families. And so it's not that a certain style, like I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that not
Mm-hmm.
a certain, it's not a certain style, it's a connection that you have together
Mm,
that will
exactly.
may be with you. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really one thing I like to say to homeschool moms. It's that connection
Mm.
is way beyond education. It's
Mm.
that's going to make them love learning, and that is what's going to they're going to learn way beyond those 18 years that you have them. So enjoy those years,
Wow.
make it vital and make it slow,
Mm.
as you have coined it, make it slow and enjoy those moments and the connections and the home life. And yeah,
You
those
know,
that's just yeah.
Susie, I think it's really important for homeschoolers to hear people with your perspective speak about that. Because honestly, especially when your kids are younger, when you're first starting out, you don't necessarily have the long range perspective, right? Because
Mhm.
you're more afraid of what the long range is going to look
Yes,
like. You don't
I
know.
know.
But it's so important to hear that because, and I've talked to last year, I had a lot of mom friends whose kids were like they were off and doing other things, going to college or just not beyond 18 or, and just were talking and having this conversation. And the things that you worried about at the beginning are never the things that you think are important
Yeah.
at that end. It's the things that you're saying and
Yes.
how important that connect. What creates a well-adjusted person?
Yeah.
What are the elements? Like if you had 10 things to do from the ages of 0 to 18, the list is not actually that
Yeah,
long, right?
I know.
It's but yeah, so I think it's just so important. I think moms just they need to hear it over and over
Yes.
and
Yeah.
over again. They really do.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we as moms, we love our kids and we want the best
Mm-hmm.
for them, but and then we need to just have it in front of us. And that's why I so desperately wanted to talk to you, because you're the way you've written this book and your mentality is exactly what moms need to hear. And yeah, and you're right. Like we need to be here to speak to those young moms who are
Yeah.
worried, laying in bed, sick, worried, what am I doing? Am I doing this right? And they
Mm-hmm.
failed again and they feel like they failed again. They haven't, but they feel like they failed again. And they don't have a light and they need to see that light, that of what really matters. And it is
Yes.
important for our children to learn the 3 R's. It's not like, okay, I can't, you don't have to worry, but it should not be the main focus in that
Mm-hmm.
sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you also talked about daily rhythms in
Mm-hmm.
homeschooling. What do you think are the key benefits of a rhythm for both parents and children?
Mm-hmm. I think that when we have healthy rhythms and routines in the home, it helps us to align our values with our activity. So a lot of times we're in go mode and we're doing, but we haven't even carefully considered if we are doing the things that are the most important things, if we're doing the things that we truly value. Like sometimes we think things are a good idea and we say they're a good idea, but our activity doesn't exactly align, right? Like we'll say, oh, I really value connection with my children. And you look and you say, where is that intentional time of connection happening? And I'm not saying it can't happen while you're making dinner or it can't
Mhm.
happen in the in between moments because it certainly does.
Yes,
But
yes.
are there intentional things that you've thought about and implemented into your day because you're saying that's important to you?
Mm.
Or another example is you can't say that I love for my children to pursue their own interests. And then you fill their activity or fill their days with so much activity, that you might have come to some agreement is a good idea. Sports teams and clubs and outings and play dates. And then you're like, when do they have time to actually do that
Yeah.
thing? And how much time do they want? I have a child who is an artist and to sit and draw and do some of the things that she does takes hours. And so you think of something like that. Does your child have that time in the day, hours that they feel like is theirs, that feel like that they can actually pursue this interest? How much
Mhm.
time do these interests actually take? So I think healthy rhythms and routine help us to better align our values with our activity, but it also helps to protect us against ourselves and
Yeah.
put some margins for peace. It protects us from overscheduling because sometimes we can look at the things that we are trying to get done in the day and we know your life, your tendencies, your capacity, your children. Is that actually too much? I
Yeah.
think sometimes I laugh at myself still. I
Yeah.
do things and I'm like, okay, but having that and constantly reflecting on it, having that
Mhm.
intention I think it's okay to make a mistake, and I think it's okay, but it's the habit
Yeah.
of looking that
Yes.
helps you to say, it's okay. I'm not going
Yeah.
to beat myself up about this because we didn't do X, Y, and Z today.
Mm.
I planned too much for today.
Yes.
So
Yes.
how can I go about doing this differently? But rhythms are also seasonal. And I think that we have to expect things to change because people are growing. We're not static beings, right? So there's that, just that. I think saying that rhythms and routines is good means that you're paying attention.
Are you navigating the rewarding but challenging journey of homeschooling? Do you sometimes wish for guidance tailored just for you and your family's unique needs? Hi, I'm Susie Lovers, Christian homeschool life coach, and I'm here to help you find clarity and peace in your homeschooling adventure. Join me on my podcast, Near Still Waters, where we explore the joys and hurdles of homeschooling with faith and love at the center. And here's something special just for you. I am offering a free one-on-one coaching session to help personalize your homeschooling experience, ensuring that it aligns with your family's values and goals. Whether you're looking for fresh teaching strategies, need help balancing your day, or want to deepen your self-awareness techniques, I'm here to support you. This is more than just advice. It's about building a community and growing together in faith and knowledge. Spaces are very limited, so don't wait. Visit nearstillwaters.ca or click the link in the episode description to schedule your free session today. Also, I'm offering a $27 course on children's different learning needs. So there's different ways that your children learn, and it's very important for you as a parent to discover what that is. I've created a course with a beautiful, full-fledged e-booklet to go with the course. It's just a mini course. It won't take long to get through, but the knowledge is abundant. Go to nearstillwaters.ca, click on the Unleashing Potential, find Nurturing Your Child's Learning Style. You will be able to download for $27 this small mini course, along with a beautiful workbook that you'll be able to go back to again and again, and you will be able to help your child in a way more effective way as a homeschool parent. This is a must-have for every homeschool parent, all at the low cost of $27. Get your copy today.
So there's that mentality that growth and change is expected. We cannot create a schedule. At 9 o'clock, we do this. At 10 o'clock, we do this. At 11, and expect it to go right. We're dealing with people here.
Yes.
And some days I'm going to feel sick, or some days and there has to be a flow that we can adopt where we can get past those things. Because a rhythm is not the same as a schedule. It's not like it's not the same. But there's a rhythm is like the family knows like what to expect. It's like I can turn to my kid and say, hey, I'm not feeling well. But because we have a natural flow of, okay, mom, then you know what? Can I go read quietly? Because those are routines that you put in place, or it's more like that.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sick today. We're going to have a pajama day on the couch watching the First World War or whatever it is, or science. Those are just as valuable in that. And then there's new babies. There's different seasons in life, right? There's seasons when a child is sick. And I spoke with Amy, I forget what her last name is, but her son is going through cancer. Her youngest son has cancer. She has to have a whole new perspective in this time of her life to deal with that situation. Or there's many different things that people have to go through, but you have to step back and say, it's not important right now. What's important is us. My child.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then knowing that those things change sometimes. I remember when new babies would come, it would be like just another example, just saying, okay, I would love to do this in the morning, but I can't because I have to put the baby down for a nap. So when the baby is napping, I'm going to take this child and we're going to sit down and work on some math because it's a little less distracting. And that's going to be our flow and our rhythm for a while. And then when that baby doesn't need that nap anymore, then it changes again. And then it's just that constant willingness to be like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay.
It doesn't have to. It doesn't always have to look the same. Yeah. So how can parents start implementing like a slow learning style if they're feeling overwhelmed with the pace that they are doing school at with right now?
I would say start small. So that can be on either end of the spectrum. You can either start and think about one constraint that is holding you back from doing the things that you really want to do. Like maybe it's the idea that your children need to be doing every single subject every single day. Maybe that's the constraint. Maybe the constraint is that you're doing way too many outside activities. Maybe the constraint, like everybody has a different constraint.
Yeah.
But if you identify one constraint, like one thing that's holding you back from feeling like you're able to slow down and enjoy this a little bit more, then
Hmm.
identify that one thing and change it. Or on the other side, think about one aspect of this. In this whole book, there's so many ideas, things that I
Yeah.
talk about, things that can be included in the idea of slow. If there's one thing, one idea that feels really life-giving for you, that feels like, oh, this is exciting, I'm really drawn to this, choose one thing and try to implement that. Don't try to do everything. Don't try to do too much. Don't try to address all the constraints at one time. Like it's okay to do it. It's okay to slow down.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
okay to do one of those at a time. But
Yes.
that's my advice is always start small.
Yeah.
Like start small. Sometimes even when there were things that I know I wanted to do or with my children or ideas that I wanted to implement, I would do one thing and then practice it. It
Yeah.
felt weird a little and uncomfortable if I knew, and then we would practice it for a while until it felt comfortable, and then I could attack the next thing because
Yeah.
we had
Exactly.
that down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then sometimes when you do that one thing, it may not feel right. And you have to
Exactly.
go back and try something else, and just
Right.
be flexible and spontaneous on how to do
hmm
that. Yeah. In the book, you emphasize the importance of play and creativity. And why is that important to you to also have spontaneity in the homeschool routine?
Play is a very important need for human beings. I'm going to go beyond children. It's not just children. Play just changes as children get older. And there are aspects of play that adults need and desire as well. And there are many wonderful psychologists who can explain this a lot better. Some of them I've quoted in my book, but
Hmm.
play is a very real need and it's a very valuable way of learning. Young children explore ideas and explore things through their play. Sometimes you can see that when they're creating these pretend worlds and they're pretending to be different things or they're exploring ideas. It's just very natural for children. It's
Hmm.
how they learn. Older children and adolescents, their play is very tied to their interests. They're exploring ideas and things that they want to do through the things that they decide to do, the way that they spend their time, the media they engage with. All it's like by the time we're adulthood, there's an element of like hard fun. Like we like challenges and to play around with those things to see what those challenges can become. Play is a very real need. So for me to say, of course, that should be a part of our educational plan.
Yes.
I think a lot of times adults like to say play is what you do after you do school. And I think that play is actually a really valuable way of learning. So why not
Yeah.
incorporate it into that? How
Exactly. Yeah.
can we, or how can we even look at homeschooling with a more playful a more playful lens? Sometimes I think that's how
Yeah.
I talk about that in the book too. That's how we enjoy it more. I think
Yeah.
sometimes we're so afraid to do that and we're so serious about it. And we can experiment. We can do this playfully. We can see, does this work? We can think of an educational idea and try it out. There's things that challenge is fun. Challenge can be fun. And so play is a very real need. And I think that's why it's important to incorporate it into the life of homeschool. And when I talk about spontaneity, it's so interesting because one of the things I say in the book is that one of the definitions of spontaneity is proceeding from some natural tendency. I think it's like a natural feeling or native
Hmm.
tendency. And so I always think, what would a very natural response be for me in an educational environment if I wasn't inhibited by worry or pressure that not going slow produces, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I want to
Yeah.
invite that level of spontaneity in where I can just naturally respond, play around with an idea, spontaneously decide to alter my plan
Yes.
or to incorporate something or visit something or to change something even in the curriculum I'm using or to there's so many ways like
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's like hard to even think about one because there's so
Yeah.
many ways that we can do that and I do lay out
Yeah.
some of those in the book but that is definitely important and joy producing to
Yeah.
incorporate
That's
that
what I was
level of
going to
play
say.
and
Yeah. That,
spontaneity. Yeah.
yeah, the spontaneity I think will bring joy, and yeah, it'll just bring a lot of joy because it's something that you didn't expect to bring that
Mm-hmm.
little glimmer of joy into your day, and there it was, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
for
for
sure.
sure.
Yeah. So how do you balance the need for structure though, like with the freedom of a slower, more spontaneous. So how do you balance that? How would you advise parents how to balance that aspect of school, homeschooling?
That's a good question. So when we say the need for structure, it implies that its structure can be a very necessary component, right? For real reasons demonstrated by the members of the
Mm-hmm.
family. Like structure is important for very real reasons.
Yes.
But at what point does that structure begin to impose ways of operating or ways of responding to
Exactly.
each other or ways
Yep.
of communicating with each other that are rooted in tension?
Yep.
And that cause joy to suffer.
Yep.
So I would say that that's when it's time to focus on something else. So one of the things I say in the book is that I really resonate with the image of a balance as being a scale, a balance scale, the hanging balance scales,
Yep.
where you put something on one side, it drops too low, and you have to balance
Yep.
it and figure out
Mm-hmm.
the weight of each side. And the reason why that resonates with me is because the process of finding balance is imperfect. And I think it's supposed to be. And we often talk about balance as achieving perfection.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's actually the way it's supposed to be. So, balancing structure with a slower, more unhurried pace, it's when, like what I said before, when does that structure start to impose something that you actually don't want? Then it's time to figure out what belongs on that other side of the balance scale or what needs to be taken off of that structure side. And that's exactly how you create balance, is by constantly being in tune to the way that you're feeling, to the responses of the very real people you are in relationship with, that you are teaching. It boils down to that connection, doesn't it? You have to stay in tune to that and not ignore that, and be
Yep.
willing to make the necessary changes and ask the hard questions that are required of you in order to bring something back into balance. But to expect it to look perfect, it doesn't.
No. No, exactly. And yeah, it's exactly right. Like the balance is, you can say balance, but balance is always moving, right? We have to be willing to move with it and change with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Can you expand on what you call self-directed learning? And
Mm.
why do you think self-directed learning is so important for children?
I think when you slow down and you say, hey, our time is valuable, and hey, I value what your interests are and what you think, then one of the things that you're going to value, or that you're going to realize that your children value, is
Mhm.
their time and what to learn and to explore ideas at their own pace. So I have this whole chapter on self-directed learning that it basically explores that a little bit. So self-directed learning is just things that the child wants to do, choices that they are making for themselves. So, not because the parent told them to learn it or the parent says it's a good idea. And maybe they did, but it's still something that the child wants to pursue learning on their own. So, when they're really young, it just looks like things that they choose to do. I want to paint, or I want to play with my dolls, or I want to go outside and dig in the dirt. Sometimes
Mhm.
but it's highly attached to choice. And those kinds of things change and grow depending on the personalities of your children and the ages of your children. For an older adolescent, it could be, I want to create a podcast, or it's so vast, right?
Yeah.
It's just the things that the child wants to do and why that's important and what our role should be during that time. Because there are some families that look at that as like the gold seal, that's the soul, that's all the learning that
Yeah.
they find important to do. And then there are other families that are incorporating that with other kinds of traditional learning or
Yeah.
using curriculum. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's
No,
not one thing. It's no one right way to do it. It's just
for
saying,
sure.
I'd like to do this. I'd like to incorporate my children's interests and help them to develop the habits of learning and the skills that get developed when there's buy-in from the child and when it's the child's choice in what they're learning. It's my child and me as a mentor in that process. It's not about the topic that they choose. It's about the things that they are learned to do that are broader than
Yeah.
that topic. So when my
Yeah.
kid decides this is an example that I'm making up.
Yeah.
When my child says, yeah, oh my gosh, I'm like, I love Pokemon. What do you want to do with that? I can get behind the research that you want to do. Researching is a broader
Mm-hmm.
skill. I'm drawing and writing, and that those are things that I can help mentor you with. I want to create a club with my
Yeah.
friends where we go on these Pokemon quests. Great. Creating a club, the kind of leadership skills that you need to
Yes,
run a club. Those are so
exactly.
those things translate from one
For
experience
sure.
to the next. So
Yeah.
yes, let's it doesn't matter what the interest is. So I spend a whole chapter, a very long
Yeah.
chapter, talking
Yeah.
about those kinds of things and how we mentor kids through those things and
Yeah.
what our role can be through those
Yeah.
kinds of moments of learning.
Yeah. So cool. So cool. Yeah. Yeah. And I think so many homeschool moms also worry about
Mhm,
falling behind, not keeping up with certain academic standards, whatever they are. But how would you coach or
mhm,
mentor a mom who wants to find peace in slowing down
mhm,
and do that
mhm,
without guilt?
mhm. I think one of the reasons why I spend some time in the book talking about this is because I think we often accept the standards without questioning, excuse me, what they are or where they came from. And the reason why we have to do that is because we need to ask ourselves if we should be upholding the same standard. And I think that some of the standards around children and around the way and children's learning have been created very unfairly in many aspects. And so sometimes people assume that when you talk about slowing down, that you are automatically saying that it's okay to be lazy or it's okay
Hmm.
to be unproductive. And so I spend a lot of time really spelling out in the first chapter what are some of the misconceptions about slowing down, what I'm not talking about
Yeah.
here, because those are some real worries. And
Yeah.
people worry that if they slow down, their children will fall behind. And to do that, to assume that thought without even carefully considered if the standard itself needs questioning,
Hmm.
can be a dangerous area to tread on. Even as a homeschooler,
Yeah.
you could be indirectly applying some of those same faulty systems and measures that traditional education uses
Yeah.
to categorize student achievement. When you are looking at indicators of how they measure up against their peers, we think that all children of this age should know something, but that's not exactly true. That's not exactly even how it is in the world of
No,
education.
it can't be,
Academics
right?
can't be. Academic
No.
standards are developed by these governing bodies. A lot of times you think of Common Core and all these things, they're largely developed to be uniform and highly specific. And they don't actually take into account the individuality of every single learner. And you assume that you walk into a sixth grade classroom and all the kids, all 30 kids are on the same page of the same book. Ask a teacher in a classroom. That's
No.
not exactly true.
No.
So to adopt that same idea at home, it doesn't mean because one kid is here and another kid is here, doesn't mean that this kid is failing. No,
No.
it does not, because learning and growth are broader than that. And you can't exactly expect for every child to do something in lockstep with every other child. There are similarities, but that's not how child development happens. And so to adopt that for your child when you have the opportunity to engage with them in that smaller context one-on-one and just go at a different pace, yeah, challenge them for sure, have high expectations, but don't push something on them just because
Yeah.
someone told you to, or it makes sense when that's not exactly what they need. Sometimes children are demonstrating. Sometimes you're at home with your child and you discover that they do have some real challenges that you
Yeah.
do need to address, learning
Yep.
challenges. But to say that equals them not being smart or not making
No.
progress, don't go
Yeah.
there. Draw that out a
Actually,
little bit.
yeah, it actually makes me sad that kids are expected to perform a certain way because
Mhm,
it just makes me sad because they're kids. And yeah, it's just not the way we're created. We're created to be individuals and we're not lock, stock, and barrel like everybody
mhm,
else. It's just we're not
mhm,
robots. And yeah,
mhm.
I find it very sad when there's children who are falling behind and they have to go through a lot of pressures to fit up to, and then they just simply can't.
Yeah.
Whereas they could thrive in another situation. And I think that's my biggest thing against those large schools, like more
Mhm,
institutional schools, because I think it really is it doesn't give any advantage to kids. There's obviously lots of balanced and stable people that come out of schools like that. I did myself. But yeah, it can be so much more full and rich and stuff.
mhm.
And
Yeah. And I think a lot of kids in those traditional settings, they do well when they fit within the parameters of what appropriate school based behavior. And once you have a kid who falls outside of those boundaries, unfortunately, it means something very negative for them in those settings. It's not necessarily the way it has to be
No.
or should be.
No, and it can affect them their whole life. Like they could never recover from that because they're so impressionable as a child. Um, can you share some success stories of your own
Mm-hmm.
homeschool, as you learn how
Sure.
to slow down?
For sure. Here's an example. I'm thinking of one particular child and multiple children who are dyslexic, but when my child was this one child that I'm thinking of was younger, and first at that age where I would say other children are you're starting to wonder, hey, why aren't they as interested in reading as these other children? For us, slowing down in this particular instance meant
Yeah.
really tuning in to readiness factors, like my individual child, what messages they were that they were sending me. Incredibly smart and intelligent and interested in so many things, but just not just because he struggled, but also just not ready to do some of the reading work that another child of mine did before
Yeah.
its
Yeah, for
age. And
sure.
me just saying, okay, I'm going to go with this timeline a bit, like just pulling apart dismantling all of those worries and thoughts that were going through my own brain, but saying, okay, let me study and get more information about some real ways that I can support you through this. But I'm willing to just do whatever it takes and study these sounds of letters or these all the steps that go into reading just on a lot slower, just go a lot slower. And when you look frustrated and we're going to stop. And so it turned into something that was very slower. And I am so glad that I did that because it preserved our relationship.
Yeah.
Whereas I could have just been, just like in a school setting, I'm sure, just another person who was making him feel dumb for not remembering things or making
Yeah.
him feel. He develops such a confidence, a level of confidence that's like really unshakable
Yeah.
and about himself as a learner. I would watch him in other settings where he did have to be with children who read at all different levels, and he would confidently look at them, especially after he knew what his diagnosis was. He would confidently look at them and tell them, okay, I read that wrong. You might be laughing, but I read that wrong because I'm dyslexic. And sometimes my brain, and he, like, the
Yeah.
confidence.
Yeah.
And it was something that was developed in at home.
Yeah.
And had he not had that opportunity to be doing so many other things that he saw himself as smart and capable because he
Yeah.
was doing so many other different kinds of learning, and he was able to express his knowledge in so many other ways,
Yes.
not just reading and not just writing. And he
Yeah.
still read a lot of books, and me validating his
Yeah.
desire. I went like this because he's listening and consumed so many books through audiobooks, and a lot of
So
times,
I know
to
I
say
have
that
also have a
that's
deck
not
second.
real reading. No, 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 no. Let's not go.
Absolutely
Anyway,
is.
so just the ability to develop all of that in a home setting and the level of confidence that he gained in that, and now being at a place where he can read and he devours books, whether it's on audio or
Yeah.
through the reading of his eyes, but just having to do that on his own timeline, and saying I'm in an environment where it was okay to struggle and it was okay to not look like every other kid, and to develop at a pace was not detrimental to him at all. In fact, it was extremely the opposite. So that
Yeah.
was a success story that I was able to see. And that's not something
Yeah.
you can see and know how it's going to turn out on the other side. But
Yeah. For sure.
I'm happy that we
Yeah.
stuck in that
How old
pace.
is your son now?
He's going to be 13.
Oh, 13. Okay. So I have a son
Not like
also
he's not quite 13 yet.
oh,
I
he's
always
not
say
13.
that about him.
Don't put him there
No.
yet.
Yeah, I'm not.
Don't rush that.
He acts a lot older. And so sometimes I'm like, yeah, I always put him there. And he actually just said to me a few weeks ago, you always add on a year to my age. And I'm like, I'm sorry. It's your maturity level, really. It makes me mess that up. But yeah.
Yeah. I have one of my sons was also dyslexic, and it took me a long time to figure that one out. And yeah, he's 22 now, or 23.
Mm-hmm.
23. He's married and he has a good job. And so and also the audiobooks was huge with him. It still is.
Yeah.
He still listens to all kinds of
Yep.
audiobooks, which is just
Mm-hmm.
great. I can't really say he loves to sit down and read, pick up a book and read. He
Mm-hmm.
can do it,
Yeah.
but he doesn't absolutely love it as much as the audiobooks. And
Right.
I'm good with that. I'm glad
Yeah.
that learning is still going beyond his
Exactly.
homeschool years, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So I I'm not at the end of my questions, but I did say we would be here for about an hour, and I just can't tell you how much I appreciate talking to you and hearing your perspective. And I hope that everyone who hears this goes out and buys your book, because it's a must. I can tell you it's a must read. And yeah, so do you have any future projects that you are thinking of, or?
I know that I definitely want to continue writing. I don't have any one particular project that I'm working on right now, but I also would love to, in an ideal world, I've got to figure out a way with my email list or something. I'd love to also hear from people. What do you want to hear more about? Is there an area that you would like to hear more of in this area translated into this, to see if that also sparks any interest for
Mhm.
future ideas? But one thing that I was really I heard and was very pleased by people's responses to the book, who were from people who are not even homeschooling, but who have
Oh,
their children in traditional schools. And they said that even from a parenting perspective, that this had a lot to offer. And I really appreciated that. And my husband thought it might be worthwhile to even reformat the book and put it into terms for people who are parenting. And but anyway, I don't,
yeah,
there's more coming, but nothing I'm
yeah.
specifically working on yet.
So if there was one message that you
Mhm.
wanted, that you would hope all your readers would take away from your book, The Joy of Slow, what would you, what would be the most important thing that you would
Mm,
want them to take away?
yeah. I would want them to walk away with the book, not saying, oh, here I have this blueprint for exactly how the slow schooling should be done, but more like I've been inspired to figure out what this means for my family.
Mhm.
Our families are important. The years that we have with our children are important. The time we have with them is important. And so let's be intentional about what we're doing in that time. Let's just not let it go on and continue without making sure that time is aligned with the things that we value as a
Mhm.
family. And there's nothing that is a lot of times in life we're just looking for the easy way out. We're looking for things to feel more easy.
Yeah,
But the things that are worthwhile, we do them not necessarily because they're easy. It's
yeah,
because they're meaningful.
yes,
And so let's live lives of meaning. That's what I hope that people
yeah.
would take away from this.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect, actually. It's a great way to end our time together. Yes, so thank you again from
Thank
the
you.
bottom of my heart for coming on and speaking to us. And I hope that your moms there will also be blessed by this discussion. And yeah, I'll keep following you and see what work you do.
Thank you so much, Susie. It was really nice meeting with you.
You're welcome. Come on, we'll see you later.
See you. Bye bye.
Bye.